The sun beat down mercilessly on Interstate 10, the asphalt shimmering with heat that rose in waves from the blacktop. Jack Reeves adjusted his sunglasses, calloused fingers gripping the steering wheel of his customized Peterbilt 389. The 18-wheeler's engine hummed with a deep, reassuring constancy as he navigated the long stretch of highway cutting through the Chihuahuan Desert, just 30 miles north of the Mexican border. At first glance, Jack appeared to be just another long-haul trucker, weathered face, 3-day stubble, and the 1,000-yard stare that came from endless hours on America's highways. His faded Texas Rangers baseball cap and worn flannel shirt completed the image of a man who belonged to the road. But beneath this unremarkable exterior lay a lifetime of training and experience that most people couldn't begin to comprehend. The radio crackled with chatter from other truckers, warnings about road conditions and speed traps. Jack listened with half an ear, his attention focused more on the rearview mirrors where he'd spotted the same black SUV for the third time in as many hours. Coincidence? Maybe. But Jack Reeves hadn't survived 3 tours with the 75th Ranger Regiment by believing in coincidences. Southbound traffic looking clear past mile marker 127. A voice announced over the CB. Border Patrol checkpoint active at the 93. Jack keyed his mic. Appreciate the heads up, good buddy. Big red rolling through. His eyes never stopped scanning. Side mirrors, road ahead, the distant mountains that rose like teeth from the desert floor. The cargo manifest listed machine parts bound for El Paso, but Jack knew what was really in the reinforced containers welded to the undercarriage of his trailer. Government prototype communications equipment, non-lethal but valuable beyond measure to anyone looking to circumvent American border security. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple despite the blasting air conditioning. It wasn't the heat making him sweat. It was the gut feeling he'd carried since leaving the secured facility in Houston. The feeling that had saved his life countless times in Kandahar and Mosul. Something wasn't right. Jack eased off the accelerator, letting the truck's speed drop just enough to see if the black SUV would pass. It didn't. Instead, it maintained the exact same distance behind him, adjusting its speed to match his. Amateur move. If they were professionals, they'd have switched vehicles by now, or at least varied their distance. His mind flashed back to 2012, Route Irish in Baghdad, the deadliest road in the world. His convoy hit by a complex ambush. 3 vehicles lost, 7 men down. The memory was as fresh as yesterday's coffee, the sounds and smells rushing back with startling clarity. The distinctive crack of AK-47 fire. The acrid smell of burning rubber and cordite. The metallic taste of fear and adrenaline. Jack shook his head, forcing the images away. That was then. This was now. Different road. Different war. Same stakes. He reached beneath his seat, fingers brushing against the cold steel of his modified Sig Sauer P320. The weapon wasn't just a comfort, it was an extension of himself, as familiar as his own right hand. Next to it lay a satellite phone that wasn't registered to any civilian network. One call and a QREF team from Fort Bliss would be scrambled within minutes. But Jack wasn't ready to make that call. Not yet. You didn't spend 15 years in special operations without developing a pathological need to handle your own problems. The highway stretched before him, empty save for a few scattered vehicles, a family sedan, 2 motorcycles riding in tandem, and a white panel van that had exited a rest stop half a mile back. Normal traffic for this stretch of I-10. Or so it seemed. Jack's mind calculated distances, angles, and scenarios with the unconscious efficiency of a chess grandmaster. If the SUV was just the spotter, where was the trigger team? The motorcycles, perhaps, riding too close together for casual travelers. Or the van, perfect for a mobile assault team. He'd known this run would be dangerous when he accepted it. After retiring from the Army 4 years ago, Jack had purchased his truck with savings and his military pension, determined to find the peace that had eluded him in civilian life. The open road had provided that for a time, until an old commander had reached out 8 months ago. "We need reliable, independent contractors," Colonel Harrington had said. People who can move sensitive equipment without drawing attention. People who can handle themselves if things go sideways. The pay was exceptional, but that wasn't why Jack had said yes. He'd said yes because purpose was a powerful narcotic for men like him, men who had spent their lives in service, who found the mundane rhythms of civilian existence almost unbearably hollow. His wife, Maria, would have understood. She'd always understood the man she married, until the IED en route Tampa took her from him during her third deployment as a combat medic. Jack had been in Afghanistan when it happened, unable to even attend her funeral. The gold band still circled his left ring finger, a tribute and a reminder of why the border mattered, why security mattered, why the mission always mattered. The radio crackled again. Heads up eastbound at marker 84. Looks like trouble. Jack tensed, eyes darting to the location display on his GPS. He was approaching marker 87. What kind of trouble? He responded, voice casual despite the adrenaline now coursing through his system. A pause. Static. Then, just a feeling, driver. Just a feeling. The warning was vague enough to be dismissed as paranoia, specific enough to confirm Jack's suspicions. Someone on the channel was alerting him. Friend or foe, impossible to tell. He reached for the hidden switch beneath his dashboard, activating systems that no civilian semi-truck should possess. The reinforced steel plates that could drop to protect the engine block. The run-flat tires that could sustain multiple gunshots. The smoke dispensers mounted beneath the trailer. 10 years ago, he'd been extracting high-value targets from Solder City under the cover of darkness. Today, he was driving a truck through the American Southwest. Different job, same skill set. Situational awareness. Tactical patience. Violence of action when necessary. A flash of movement caught his attention. The motorcycle's accelerating, moving up to flank him on the left. The van was pulling closer on the right. And now a new player. A red pickup truck speeding up from behind, passing the black SUV, driver talking animatedly on a cell phone. For vehicles, at least 8 hostiles, assuming minimum 2-man teams in the larger vehicles. Possibly more hidden in the van. Unfavorable odds for most people. For Jack Reeves, it was Tuesday. He thumbed the satellite phone's panic button. Not a call for immediate help, but an alert to Harrington that the package might be compromised. GPS tracking would now be activated, recording everything that happened in and around the truck. Approaching marker 85, Jack set into the CB, voice steady. Any other traffic should clear the area. Repeat, any friendlies should clear the area. He didn't know if anyone listening was an ally, but it was worth the warning. What came next wouldn't be pretty for bystanders. The first shot came as the pickup pulled alongside, passenger window rolling down to reveal a man with a bandana covering the lower half of his face. The distinctive crack of a 9mm pistol was followed by the ping of the bullet deflecting off reinforced glass. Amateurs. If they'd been professionals, they'd have used rifles and targeted the tires or engine block first. Jack's response was immediate and decisive. He jerked the massive steering wheel to the right, 12 tons of mechanical fury slamming into the pickup truck. The vehicle skidded, driver fighting for control, before spinning into the desert scrub alongside the highway. 1 down. 3 to go. The motorcycles separated, one dropping back while the other accelerated ahead, rider reaching for something in his saddlebag. Jack knew what came next. They'd try to force him to stop, either with a roadblock ahead or by targeting the truck's vulnerable points. His hands moved with muscle memory, downshifting while simultaneously reaching for the SIG. The weapon came up smoothly, and Jack fired twice through his own side window, the safety glass disintegrating as designed. The lead motorcyclist jerked, machine wobbling before crashing in a spray of sparks and tumbling limbs. No time for regret. These men had made their choice when they targeted his truck. The van was pulling closer, side doors sliding open to reveal what Jack had feared. A team of 4 armed men, rifles raised. Not local thugs or opportunistic bandits. These were trained operatives. Military precision in their movements, disciplined fire control. Cartel enforcers, most likely. the kind that received training from former Special Forces operatives who had chosen money over loyalty. Jack slammed the brakes, the unexpected deceleration causing the van to overshoot. Before they could correct, he was accelerating again, the powerful diesel engine roaring as he pushed the truck to its limits. The satellite phone chirped, message received. Help would be coming, but not soon enough. Fort Bliss was at least 40 minutes out, even for a helicopter QRF. Jack was on his own. The highway ahead was straight for the next 5 miles, offering no tactical advantages. But Jack knew this route, had driven it monthly for the past 8 months. 3 miles ahead was a rise with a steep embankment on the right side. If he could make it there, he'd have options. The remaining motorcycle had dropped back to join the SUV, both vehicles now keeping pace about 70 yards behind. The van had recovered and was accelerating to catch up. They were coordinating, communicating. Professional. Eastbound traffic. This is Big Red, Jack announced over the CB. We've got bandits on I-10. Any law enforcement monitoring this channel, I am under attack. Only static answered. Either no one was listening, or the attackers were jamming the frequency. Jack was truly alone. His mind calculated fuel, distance, ammunition, options. The SIG had 12 rounds remaining in the magazine, plus 2 spare mags in the center console. The truck had about half a tank, more than enough to reach El Paso if he could shake his pursuers. The reinforced components would withstand small arms fire, but not indefinitely. The key was to reach the rise, use the terrain to his advantage. Create a funnel, force them to come at him from predictable angles. Turn the hunters into the hunted. Jack's breathing slowed, heart rate steadying despite the danger. This calm under fire had been drilled into him through thousands of hours of training and combat. The Ranger creed echoed in his mind. Never shall I fail my comrades. The cargo he carried wasn't just metal and circuits. It represented the safety of his brothers and sisters still serving on the front lines. The black SUV was pulling alongside now, passenger leaning out with what looked like an automatic rifle. Jack swerved, the massive truck responding sluggishly but effectively. The SUV dropped back, driver reassessing. 2 miles to the rise. Jack's hand moved to another hidden switch, this one activating the smoke dispensers. Thick white clouds billowed from beneath the trailer, obscuring the view of his pursuers. It wouldn't stop them, but it might force them to make mistakes. The van reappeared through the smoke, driver more aggressive now, clearly determined to force Jack off the road. These weren't just cartel soldiers, they were elite, the kind tasked with high-value operations, which meant they knew exactly what Jack was carrying. 1 mile to the rise. Time seemed to slow as Jack mentally prepared for what came next. He'd need perfect timing, perfect execution. The kind of high-stakes maneuver that separated the living from the dead in his former profession. The CB radio suddenly crackled to life. Big Red, this is Sidewinder. We have your 20. Hang tight. Sidewinder, call sign for Border Patrol tactical units. Help was closer than expected. But Jack knew better than to rely on external salvation. In his experience, you survived on your own skills or you didn't survive at all. The rise appeared ahead, the road climbing gently before cresting to reveal miles of empty highway beyond. Jack tightened his grip on the wheel, muscles tensing for what came next. This stretch of desert had seen violence before: Apache raids, Pancho Villa's revolutionaries, modern cartel incursions. Today it would witness something new, a former Army Ranger turning a commercial truck into a weapon of war. As Jack Reeves approached the crest of the rise, memories of past battles merging with the present danger, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. He hadn't sought this fight, but now that it had found him, he would finish it. The hunters were about to discover they'd chosen the wrong prey. The Sunrise truck stop outside of Las Cruces was a familiar waypoint for Jack, a nondescript oasis of diesel pumps, greasy food, and truckers swapping stories that grew taller with each telling. 18 hours earlier, before the ambush that would transform 50 miles of interstate into a combat zone, Jack had pulled his Peterbilt into the lot for a scheduled rest period. The place was busier than usual. A dozen rigs lined up in neat rows, their massive engines ticking as they cooled in the early evening air. Jack's eyes swept the parking lot with practiced efficiency, categorizing each vehicle, each person, each potential threat or ally. It was an unconscious habit, as natural to him as breathing. Coffee, black, he told the waitress at the counter inside, a woman whose name tag read Darlene, and whose tired eyes suggested she'd seen every type of traveler the American Southwest could produce. "You look like you could use something stronger than coffee, honey," she said, pouring the steaming liquid into a chipped mug. Jack managed a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Long haul from Houston. Coffee'll do just fine." He chose a booth near the back wall, one that offered clear sight lines to both the entrance and the large windows overlooking the parking lot. His truck was visible from where he sat, cargo secure behind reinforced locks that would require industrial cutting tools to breach. Still, his eyes returned to it every few minutes, a protective instinct honed by years of responsibility for equipment worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. The place smelled of cooking grease, cigarettes, and the distinct human musk of people who'd spent too many hours on the road. Familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. Until Jack noticed the two men who entered and took seats at the counter. At first glance, they looked like any other long-haul drivers, worn jeans, boots, the particular slouch of men who spent their lives seated. But the details didn't add up. Their hands were too soft for truckers. Their clothes too new, despite the manufactured wear. And they kept glancing at Jack's rig through the window. Jack sipped his coffee, expression neutral while his mind processed the anomaly. Could be nothing. Could be everything. His satellite phone vibrated once in his pocket. A text message from an unlisted number. Package hot. Confirm secure. Colonel Harrington checking in. Jack typed a quick response, secure. On schedule. Then deleted both messages. Standard protocol. The two men at the counter were now engaged in conversation with Darlene, their Spanish accents noticeable even across the diner. They were asking about routes, road conditions east of Las Cruces. Normal enough questions for truckers. But Jack caught the subtle glance in his direction as one man mentioned I-10 toward El Paso. Jack had spent enough time in the borderlands to recognize the particular cadence of northern Mexico in their speech. Chihuahua, maybe, or Sonora. Not unusual in this part of the country. What was unusual was their interest in his truck. He finished his coffee, left a generous tip, and walked outside, deliberately taking a route that passed behind the two men. As he did, he caught a fragment of their conversation, confirmed it's the one. California plates, registry matches. What about the driver? Former military. Might be armed. Jack kept walking, pace unhurried, expression unchanged, even as his heart rate accelerated. They knew. Somehow, they knew about the cargo. About him. Outside, the desert air had cooled with the setting sun, bringing with it the particular silence of remote places. Jack conducted a careful circle around his truck, checking for tampering, trackers, anything out of place. Nothing visible, but that didn't mean nothing was there. He climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and powered up the specialized scanner built into what appeared to be a standard CB radio unit. The device swept through frequencies, checking for tracking signals or surveillance equipment. Clean. But the damage was done. They'd identified his truck, which meant they knew what he was carrying. The question now was how many of them were there, and where they planned to make their move. Jack's mind ran through scenarios like a tactical computer. If it were him planning the intercept, he'd wait for the most isolated stretch of highway, somewhere with limited cellular coverage and few witnesses. Between Las Cruces and El Paso, that meant the open desert where I-10 ran straight as an arrow through empty country. He keyed the ignition, the powerful diesel engine rumbling to life. Better to keep moving, maintain unpredictability. The scheduled rest period wasn't complete, but protocol had just been overridden by operational security concerns. As Jack pulled onto the interstate, he noticed a sand-colored pickup truck pull out from the truck stop lot behind him. Coincidence, perhaps, but Jack Reeves had long ago stopped believing in coincidences. The pickup maintained a steady distance, headlights visible in Jack's mirrors as the miles ticked by. One vehicle didn't make an ambush, but it could certainly be a spotter, calling his position to a team waiting ahead. The CB radio crackled. "Eastbound rigs, be advised, construction zone at mile marker 135. Down to one lane, over." Jack picked up the handset. "This is Big Red eastbound." "Copy that. How's the backup?" A different voice answered. "Flowing smooth right now, driver. But they're saying it'll get congested by morning." Information exchanged and verified. No hint of trouble from other drivers, which meant either they weren't aware of any issues ahead or the threat was being kept quiet. Jack reached beneath his seat, ensuring the SIG was still accessible. His fingers brushed against something else, a worn photograph in a plastic sleeve. Maria in her combat medic uniform, dark hair pulled back, smile bright against the Afghan sun. He didn't need to look at it. Every detail was burned into his memory. "Still watching your six, babe," he murmured, a ritual that had become both prayer and promise. The pickup behind him had been joined by another vehicle, a dark SUV that appeared as a silhouette of headlights in the gathering dusk. Two vehicles. Still not an ambush force, but definitely surveillance. Jack's hand hovered over the satellite phone. One call to Harrington, and a QRF team would be scrambled from Fort Bliss. But calling in support this early would mean scrubbing the mission. The cargo would be rerouted, the delivery delayed. And Jack Reeves didn't believe in failing to complete a mission just because things got complicated. Instead, he pressed the auxiliary switch that activated the truck's countermeasures. Nothing obvious happened, no lights, no sounds, but beneath the trailer, specialized equipment designed to detect and jam surveillance signals came online. If they were using standard tracking methods, they just lost their electronic eyes. The pickup truck suddenly accelerated, passing Jack on the left before pulling ahead and disappearing into the distance. Message received and understood. They knew he detected them, which meant the pretense was over. Jack's CB crackled again, this time with a voice he hadn't heard before. "Big Red, this is Roadrunner at mile marker 142. Got a situation up here you might want to know about. County boys have a roadblock set up, checking every commercial vehicle." Jack frowned. There had been no alerts about checkpoints on this route. Border Patrol occasionally set up mobile checkpoints, but they were almost always on secondary roads, not the main interstate. "Roadrunner, this is Big Red. You got eyes on these county boys? What are they looking for?" A pause, longer than normal. Then, "Didn't stick around to find out, driver. But they were real interested in eastbound semis with California plates." Jack's grip tightened on the wheel. Not a coincidence. A trap. "Appreciate the heads up, Roadrunner." Big Red out. The SUV behind him had dropped back, maintaining about a quarter-mile distance. Definitely surveillance, not direct threat. Yet, Jack checked his GPS mile marker for his current position, 118. Mile marker for the reported checkpoint, 142. 24 miles to decide on a course of action. Options scrolled through his mind like mission parameters. Continue on I-10 and risk the checkpoint. Take the next exit and find an alternate route, potentially driving into an even more isolated ambush. Call in support and scrub the mission. None of them felt right. Jack had spent too many years in hostile territory to walk blindly into an obvious trap, but he'd also never abandoned a mission without exhausting every option. There was a fourth choice, one that went against conventional wisdom but aligned with the principles of unconventional warfare he'd learned in the Rangers. When ambushed, sometimes the best defense is immediate, overwhelming offense. Don't flee the kill zone, charge through it. His decision made, Jack reached for the satellite phone and sent a text to Harrington. Possible compromise. Maintaining mission. Potential contact imminent. The response came moments later. Understood. Assets on standby. Confirm need. Translation. Help was available, but Jack would have to explicitly request it. Standard procedure for deniable operations on U.S. soil. The next exit was 7 miles ahead. Not a major interchange, just a remote access road that connected to a network of county routes paralleling the interstate. Local knowledge might give Jack an advantage over his pursuers. He activated the truck's specialized GPS system, accessing military-grade satellite imagery of the surrounding terrain. The access road led to Route 9, a two-lane blacktop that roughly paralleled I-10 but passed through more rugged country. More places for an ambush, but also more tactical options. Jack made a show of signaling early for the exit, making his intentions clear to the SUV following him. If they thought he was running scared, trying to evade the checkpoint, they might get overconfident. Overconfidence led to mistakes. Mistakes created opportunities. The exit ramp curved sharply, requiring Jack to slow the heavy truck to a crawl. In his mirrors, he saw the SUV accelerate to close the distance, obviously concerned about losing visual contact. At the bottom of the ramp, instead of turning onto the access road as expected, Jack executed a maneuver that would have made his old driving instructors at Fort Benning proud. He swung the truck in a tight arc, using the shoulder to complete a 180-degree turn, and suddenly found himself facing the SUV that had been tailing him. For a brief moment, Jack could see the startled faces of the two men in the vehicle, young, hard-featured, with the distinctive look of cartel soldiers. Not top-tier sicarios, but not street thugs either. Mid-level operators, trusted enough for surveillance, but not for the kill team that would undoubtedly be waiting ahead. Jack didn't give them time to react. He accelerated directly toward the SUV, the massive grille of his Peterbilt looming like the face of death itself. The SUV driver panicked, swerving off the road to avoid collision, sliding into the drainage ditch with a crunch of metal and plastic. No shots fired. No direct confrontation. Just a clear message. Jack Reeves wasn't prey running from predators. He was a predator who had just identified his hunters. Back on the interstate, now heading west, back the way he'd come, Jack knew he'd bought himself minutes at most. The SUV didn't appear damaged enough to be immobilized, and the occupants would already be calling in his change of direction. This wasn't an escape. It was a tactical repositioning. 3 miles back toward Las Cruces, there was another exit, one that connected to a different set of county roads. Roads that would eventually reconnect with I-10 east of the purported checkpoint, allowing Jack to bypass whatever reception committee was waiting for him. The SIG felt reassuring against his leg as he drove, its weight a reminder of options that remained if things deteriorated further. But Jack had no illusions about engaging multiple hostiles alone. His advantage lay in movement and unpredictability, in turning their careful planning against them. The second exit appeared ahead, and Jack took it without signaling, cutting across 2 lanes and onto the ramp with the fluid grace of someone who had conducted similar maneuvers in MRAP vehicles under enemy fire. The ramp led to a dusty intersection with a county road designated only by a number on a weathered sign. Jack turned east, following the GPS guidance through the darkness. The road was narrower here, less maintained, the truck's headlights illuminating a corridor through desert scrub and rocky outcroppings. Perfect ambush country. Jack kept the truck at a steady pace, neither hurrying nor dawdling, his senses hyper-alert for any sign of threat. The satellite phone remained silent, no updates from Harrington, which could mean everything was fine or that communications were being monitored. 10 minutes passed. 20. The tension in Jack's shoulders began to ease fractionally as the truck climbed a gentle rise that offered a view of the terrain ahead. Empty road stretching into darkness. Maybe he'd outmaneuvered them after all. Then his headlights caught a flash of metal on the road ahead. Something scattered across the asphalt. Caltrops or a spike strip. Jack's reaction was instantaneous. He swerved right, taking the truck partially off-road, the heavy suspension protesting as it crashed through scrub and over uneven ground. The run-flat tires, designed to withstand exactly this type of threat, held firm. As he fought the wheel, bringing the truck back onto the road beyond the hazard, his headlights swept across something else, a vehicle parked on a side trail, engine dark, almost invisible against the night landscape. Almost, but not quite. Jack cataloged details in the split second before the truck's lights moved past. White panel van. 2 figures visible in the front seats. Probably more in the cargo area. The ambush team, caught out of position by his change of route. They'd scrambled to deploy the tire hazard, but hadn't had time to set up a proper blocking position. In his mirrors, Jack could see the van's headlights flare to life. Engine starting. Beginning pursuit. Game on, Jack muttered, downshifting to power up a steeper section of road. The Peterbilt responded with a surge of acceleration, surprisingly nimble for its size. But a semi-truck, even one as modified as Jack's, couldn't outrun a van on these roads. They weren't trying to stop him here, he realized. They were hurting him. The spike strip wasn't meant to immobilize him, just to ensure he kept to this particular route. Which meant Jack crested another rise, and the trap revealed itself. 100 yards ahead, where the county road intersected with another, 3 vehicles were positioned in a triangular roadblock. Lights off, but visible now in his powerful headlights. 2 pickup trucks and another SUV, similar to the one he'd run off the road earlier. Figures moved around the vehicles. At least 6 hostiles, probably more. And they were armed, not with pistols, but with long guns. Jack could see the distinctive silhouettes of what looked like AR-15s and at least one AK variant. This wasn't a law enforcement checkpoint. This wasn't even a standard cartel interdiction. This was a military-style ambush meant to overwhelm with superior firepower. Jack's options narrowed to pinpoints. He couldn't go forward into the kill zone. Couldn't go back with the van closing from behind. Couldn't easily take the truck off-road in this terrain without risking a rollover. Time slowed as it always did in combat, his ranger training taking over, transforming fear into focused calculation. The roadblock was set up at the intersection, covering the road in 3 directions. But there was a 4th direction, a narrow trail that branched off at an angle, visible only because Jack had crested the rise at precisely the right moment to catch it in his headlights. A ranch access road, maybe, or an old mining trail. Narrower than the county road, definitely not designed for a vehicle as large as his truck. But it was unblocked. Jack made his decision, hands and feet moving in perfect coordination. Downshift for power. Steering wheel cranked hard right. Brakes applied just enough to break traction and allow the back end to slide. The Peterbilt left the main road in a controlled skid, alignment perfect for the narrow trail. Behind him, Jack heard the first shots panicked fire from the ambush team as they realized their quarry was escaping the kill zone. Bullets pinged off the reinforced cab, none penetrating. The truck crashed onto the trail, suspension bottoming out, then recovering as Jack fought for control. For a moment, it seemed he'd made it clean. Then a louder impact shook the truck, and warning lights flashed on his dashboard. One of the ambushers had gotten lucky, or had better training than the others. A shot had found something vital. The engine temperature gauge began rising rapidly. Coolant leak, probably. The truck would keep running, but not indefinitely. In his mirrors, Jack could see the van and one of the pickups from the roadblock in pursuit, bouncing wildly as they hit the uneven trail. They'd committed now. No more herding or positioning. Direct pursuit and engagement, which was exactly what Jack wanted. Because Jack Reeves hadn't survived 3 tours and countless operations by being predictable. He hadn't earned his Ranger tab by following the expected course of action. And he hadn't accepted this mission without knowing exactly what he was carrying and why it was valuable enough for the cartel to risk such a brazen operation on American soil. As the trail curved through increasingly rugged terrain, Jack allowed himself a grim smile. They thought they were chasing a truck driver trying to escape. In reality, they were pursuing a predator who had just successfully separated the pack, isolating the weakest members for individual attention. The real hunt was just beginning. The narrow trail twisted through increasingly rocky terrain, forcing Jack to navigate with absolute precision. His Peterbilt lurched and swayed, 18 wheels finding precarious purchase on ground never meant for commercial transport. Behind him, the cartel vehicles pursued with reckless determination, headlights cutting jagged patterns through the dust cloud left in Jack's wake. The engine temperature gauge continued to climb toward the red. 15 minutes, maybe 20, before critical failure. Jack needed to find a defensive position before then. His satellite phone vibrated. "Harrington. Sitrep?" The colonel's message was characteristically terse. Jack dictated a response using the hands-free system, his eyes never leaving the treacherous path ahead. "Multiple hostiles. Engaged. Vehicle compromised. Proceeding to Waypoint Delta." Waypoint Delta wasn't on any civilian map. It was a contingency location established during Jack's initial briefing, one of several emergency fallback positions scattered along his route. This particular waypoint was an abandoned ranch compound, once used for training exercises by private military contractors. Jack had memorized its layout, its approaches, its defensive advantages. If he could reach it before the truck gave out, he might have a chance. If not, the trail crested a ridge, providing Jack with a momentary glimpse of the terrain ahead. Moonlight illuminated the landscape in silver and shadow, revealing a valley basin with scattered rock formations and the dark outline of structures in the distance. Waypoint Delta, 2 miles, maybe less. The truck could make that, even with a damaged cooling system. But not without company. The van had fallen back, unable to maintain pursuit on the rough trail. But the pickup had closed the distance, a more nimble vehicle better suited to the terrain. Through his side mirror, Jack could see the driver and a passenger, the latter leaning out the window with what appeared to be an assault rifle braced against the door frame. Jack's hand moved instinctively to the SIG on the seat beside him, but he dismissed the impulse. Engaging in a firefight while driving was a last resort, especially given the rough terrain. Better to focus on reaching the compound, where he would have the advantage of prepared positions. The first shots came moments later, bright muzzle flashes followed by the distinctive crack of 5.56mm rounds. Most went wide, the pickup's movement making accurate fire impossible. But one round punched through the truck's rear window, embedding itself in the headrest inches from Jack's head. Not amateurs, then. Even hitting a moving truck from another moving vehicle on terrain this rough required skill. Jack's mind flashed back unbidden to Kunar Province, 2010. His Humvee under attack from Taliban fighters in the hills above. The familiar whistle crack of incoming rounds. The smell of hot metal and cordite. The absolute clarity that came with accepting the reality of combat. "Focus, Reeves," he muttered, forcing the memories back. Afghanistan wasn't here. Here was now. Here was a truck with failing systems, a determined enemy, and a cargo that couldn't fall into the wrong hands. The truck burst from the trail onto a wider dirt road, a ranch access road leading directly to the compound. Better surface, straight approach. But it also gave the pursuit vehicle better conditions for accurate fire. Jack keyed the sequence that activated the truck's final defensive measure, one he'd hoped to avoid using. From concealed compartments beneath the trailer, smoke canisters dropped and ignited, laying a thick defensive screen behind the truck. Not military-grade smoke. Nothing that would violate federal transportation laws. Just a commercial compound used by film crews for special effects, dense enough to obscure vision but harmless otherwise. Combined with the dust already kicked up by the truck's passage, it created a temporary visual barrier between Jack and his pursuers. Temporary, but enough. The compound appeared ahead, a cluster of low buildings surrounded by a perimeter fence. The main gate hung open, as it had since the facility was abandoned 3 years earlier. Jack guided the truck through the entrance and toward the largest structure, a vehicle maintenance bay with roll-up doors wide enough to accommodate his rig. The engine temperature warning light was now accompanied by an alarming series of beeps from the dashboard. Systems failing. Jack had pushed the truck to its limits and beyond. He backed the trailer against the far wall of the maintenance bay, positioning it to create a barrier that divided the large space. Then he killed the engine, grabbed his go bag from behind the seat, and moved quickly to secure the area. First priority, the cargo. Jack activated the trailer's security protocols from a keypad hidden beneath a service panel. Magnetic locks engaged with an audible clunk. Vibration sensors and tamper alarms activated. Anyone attempting to access the trailer now would trigger both local alarms and an alert to Harrington's team. Second priority, defensive preparations. Jack moved through the maintenance bay with practiced efficiency, identifying sight lines, cover positions, potential vulnerabilities. The building had been designed with security in mind. Limited access points, reinforced walls, elevated observation platforms that offered clear fields of fire to all approaches. Outside, he could hear the pickup truck arriving, engine revving as it circled the compound perimeter. They would be cautious now, assessing the situation, calling for backup. Standard procedure for an operation like this. Jack had time, but not much. From his go bag, he retrieved additional magazines for the SIG, a compact tactical flashlight, and a small earpiece radio scanner. Intelligence would be as crucial as firepower in the coming confrontation. The scanner picked up transmissions almost immediately Spanish, spoken with the clipped precision of men accustomed to tactical communication. Jack's years working near the border had given him enough proficiency to understand the essence. Main building. Vehicle inside. Wait for Alpha Team. 5 minutes out. Negative. Target might escape on foot. Moving to secure. Understood. Approach with caution. Subject is former military. Jack allowed himself a grim smile. At least they were treating him with appropriate respect. That might buy him the time he needed. With practiced movements, he conducted a press check on the SIG, confirming a round was chambered. 15 rounds in the magazine, plus 1 in the chamber. 2 spare magazines, 15 rounds each. 46 rounds total. Not enough for a prolonged engagement against multiple hostiles, but enough if he was smart, if he created the right conditions. The maintenance bay had a catwalk that ran along one wall, providing access to overhead lighting and ventilation systems. Jack made his way up a ladder to this elevated position, finding a spot that offered cover while maintaining visibility of all entrances. And then he waited. The patience of a predator was something Jack had learned early in his military career. The ability to remain absolutely still, to control breathing, to maintain complete situational awareness while revealing nothing of your own presence. He'd spent countless hours in observation posts and high positions, watching, waiting, gathering intelligence before striking. Now he applied those same skills, becoming one with the shadows of the catwalk as the first cartel operative entered the maintenance bay. The man moved with obvious training, weapon up, using the tactical flashlight mounted beneath the barrel to illuminate potential threats while minimizing his own exposure. He cleared the entrance area methodically, then proceeded deeper into the building, approaching Jack's truck. A second operative entered moments later, moving to cover the opposite flank. Coordinated. Professional. These weren't street-level cartel soldiers. These were their special operators, the ones tasked with high-value objectives. Jack remained motionless, controlling his breathing, observing. 2 hostiles inside. Unknown number outside, with reinforcements inbound. The situation was deteriorating rapidly in terms of numerical advantage. But numbers weren't everything. Position, information, initiative. These factors could offset a numerical disadvantage. Jack had learned that lesson in combat zones across the world, had applied it successfully against Taliban fighters and Iraqi insurgents. The first operative reached the truck, ran a hand along the driver's door, then tried the handle. Finding it locked, he moved toward the trailer, examining the heavy security locks with obvious frustration. The second operative spoke into a radio, voice low but audible in the quiet building. Vehicle secured. Driver not present. Cargo locked down. Need breaching equipment. The response came immediately. Negative. No time. Alpha Team reports law enforcement chatter. We need to move now. Burn it. Jack's breath caught. Burn it? They were willing to destroy the cargo rather than let it fall back into government hands? That suggested a level of desperation or commitment beyond a simple hijacking operation. The first operative slung his rifle and reached into a pack, withdrawing what appeared to be a thermite device. Designed to burn at temperatures high enough to melt metal, it would destroy the trailer's contents beyond recovery. Jack had seen enough. 2 hostiles, separated, one temporarily occupied with the device. The moment of maximum advantage had arrived. He took aim at the operative with the thermite device, controlling his breathing for the perfect shot. The SIG barked once, the sound amplified in the enclosed space. The operative dropped without a sound, the thermite device clattering harmlessly to the concrete floor. The second operative reacted with impressive speed, diving for cover behind a workbench as he brought his weapon to bear toward the catwalk. But he was shooting at a position Jack had already abandoned, moving laterally along the elevated walkway to establish a new firing angle. A brief exchange of fire followed, 3 rounds from the operative, all missing. One carefully placed shot from Jack that caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him from his position. Not a kill shot. Deliberately so. Jack needed information. He descended from the catwalk with practiced silence, approaching the wounded operative from a blind angle. The man was attempting to staunch the blood flow from his shoulder with one hand while keeping his weapon oriented toward Jack's last known position. "Drop it," Jack said, the SIG's barrel pressed against the back of the operative's head. "Now." The man complied, weapon clattering to the floor. "Your friend is dead," Jack continued, voice calm, emotionless. "You're wounded. More of your people are coming, but they won't get here in time to help you. So let's make this simple. Tell me what I need to know, and I'll let you walk out of here." "Go to hell, gringo," the man spat, defiant despite his obvious pain. Jack sighed. He didn't have time for interrogation resistance. "Your choice." He struck precisely at the man's wounded shoulder, applying direct pressure to the injury. The operative gasped, body convulsing from the sudden shock of pain. "The cargo," Jack said. "Why is it so important that you'd risk an operation like this on you?" Soil. The operative's breathing was ragged, face pale from blood loss and shock. But his eyes still burned with fanatical determination. "You don't even know what you're carrying, do you? Just another American dog following orders." Jack applied pressure again, just enough to make his point without pushing the man into unconsciousness. "I know exactly what I'm carrying. Communications equipment. Prototype border security technology. What I don't know is why your cartel would risk crossing a line like this to get it." A harsh laugh escaped the operative's lips. "Cartel? You think this is about drugs? About territory?" He shook his head. "You're more blind than I thought." The statement landed like a physical blow. If this wasn't a cartel operation, then who? The operative seemed to read the question in Jack's eyes. "There are forces at work beyond your understanding, American. Forces that will reshape the borderlands in fire and blood." Jack had heard similar rhetoric before, from jihadists in Afghanistan and Iraq. Religious fervor, political extremism. It came in many forms, but the zealotry was always recognizable. "What forces?" he demanded, increasing the pressure on the wound. The operative's eyes glazed slightly, shock beginning to take its toll. "La Mano Negra rises. The border will burn. La Mano Negra. The Black Hand." Jack had heard whispers of the group during intelligence briefings, a new faction emerging from the fractured landscape of the border region. Not a traditional cartel focused on drug trafficking, but something more ideological, more willing to engage in spectacular acts of violence for political effect. Terrorists in everything but name. The realization shifted Jack's understanding of the situation dramatically. This wasn't about stealing valuable technology or disrupting border security operations. This was about acquiring capabilities for a larger, more destructive purpose. The operative's eyes suddenly widened, focusing on something beyond Jack. "Too late, American," he whispered. Jack didn't hesitate. He pivoted and fired in one fluid motion, catching a third operative who had entered silently through a side door. The man dropped, but not before squeezing off a round that tore through the air inches from Jack's head. Outside, engines roared as vehicles approached rapidly. Alpha team arriving. Jack moved quickly, retrieving the wounded operative's weapon, an FN SCAR, high-end hardware not typically seen in cartel operations, and checking its magazine. Nearly full, he added it to his arsenal and continued preparing his defense. The maintenance bay had been designed with security in mind, but it wasn't a fortress. Multiple entry points, large windows, skylights, all potential vulnerabilities. Jack needed to narrow the battlefield, force the attackers into channelized approaches where their numbers would be less advantageous. He dragged a series of heavy tool cabinets to create choke points, establishing clear fields of fire while limiting his own exposure. Muscle memory from countless military operations guided his movements, creating interlocking sectors of fire, identifying fallback positions, preparing improvised devices from materials at hand. In Afghanistan, his unit had once held a remote outpost against a Taliban force that outnumbered them 8-1. The key had been controlling the battlefield, dictating where and how the engagement would occur. Jack applied those same principles now, transforming the maintenance bay into a deadly funnel. Through the scanner, he could hear Alpha Team coordinating their approach. At least 6 more hostiles, possibly more. They were discussing breach points, angles of fire, contingency plans. Professional. Determined. Jack found himself almost respecting their operational discipline. Almost. His satellite phone vibrated with an incoming message from Harrington. Assets inbound. ETA 35 minutes. Hold position. Jack grimaced. 35 minutes was an eternity in a firefight. But holding was the mission. Protecting the cargo was the mission. He'd held positions with less support for longer periods against worse odds. He sent a brief acknowledgement, then refocused on the immediate threat. The first shots came moments later, probing fire through windows and doorways, designed to identify defensive positions without committing to a full breach. Jack didn't return fire, refusing to reveal his location. Let them waste ammunition on empty space. A small cylinder crashed through a window, bouncing across the concrete floor before spewing thick smoke. Not a fragmentation grenade. They wanted to preserve the cargo intact, but a smoke grenade to obscure vision. Standard breach tactics. Jack pulled a bandana over his nose and mouth, adjusting his position to maintain visibility of key approach lanes despite the thickening smoke. His military training had included operations in reduced visibility, teaching him to focus on silhouettes, movement patterns, the distinctive sounds that betrayed a hostile presence. The first attacker came through the main entrance, using the smoke for concealment. Jack tracked the movement, waited for the perfect moment, then fired twice. The hostile went down without a sound. A barrage of covering fire followed, rounds impacting around Jack's position as 2 more attackers entered through separate points. Jack ducked behind a tool cabinet, feeling the impacts as bullets struck the other side of his cover. He had expected this, the classic movement-to-contact approach. Identify the defender's position through their fire, then suppress while additional elements maneuver to flanking positions. Textbook small unit tactics. Jack responded with equally textbook counter-tactics. He displaced laterally, moving to a prepared alternate position before engaging the nearest attacker with a short, controlled burst from the captured scar. The hostile dropped, but Jack was already moving again, staying ahead of the attacker's ability to fix his position. Through his earpiece, he could hear their growing frustration. Moving too fast. Can't pin him down. Switch to thermal. Thermal imaging. That would negate his concealment advantage. Jack needed to adapt quickly. He reached into his go bag, extracting a small device that had been included specifically for situations like this. A portable thermal countermeasure that, when activated, would create multiple heat signatures, confusing thermal imaging systems. Not standard civilian equipment, but then, this wasn't a standard civilian operation. Jack activated the device and placed it strategically, then moved to yet another prepared position. Through his earpiece, he heard immediate results. Multiple signatures. Can't identify target. Spread out. Find him. The smoke was beginning to dissipate, visibility improving incrementally. Jack counted hostiles. 4 down, at least 3 still active, possibly more outside. The odds were improving, but time was becoming critical. Each passing minute increased the risk of being overwhelmed. His mind flashed back to a similar situation in Helmand Province, his squad pinned down by Taliban fighters in a mud-walled compound. That day, salvation had come in the form of air support, a pair of I-10 warthogs that had turned the tide with thunderous strafing runs. No air support today. Just Jack Reeves, a handful of weapons, and the stubborn refusal to fail that had defined his military career. A noise from above caught his attention, movement on the roof. They were trying to gain access through the skylights, create a three-dimensional battlefield that would negate his careful preparations. Jack adjusted again, moving to a position that covered the skylights while maintaining awareness of ground-level approaches. The Scar's barrel elevated, tracking movement visible through the dusty glass panels overhead. A shadow appeared, a hostile attempting to access the latch mechanism. Jack fired 3 rounds in rapid succession, shattering the skylight and sending the hostile tumbling from the roof with a scream that cut off abruptly. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Concentrated fire from multiple positions, rounds impacting all around Jack's location. They had spotted him, committed to full suppression. Jack dropped prone, bullets passing overhead, and crawled rapidly to a new position. A round grazed his arm, burning like a hot poker against his skin. Not serious, but a reminder that his margin for error was vanishingly small. His new position offered a clear angle on one of the hostiles, who had advanced too aggressively in the excitement of believing they had Jack pinned down. The SIG barked twice, center mass, and the hostile collapsed mid-stride. 5 down, the odds continuing to improve. But the remaining hostiles were learning, becoming more cautious, more coordinated in their movements. They had recognized they were facing a professional, not some civilian trucker overwhelmed by superior numbers. Through his earpiece, Jack heard a new voice, authoritative, calm amid the chaos. Disengage. Fall back and regroup. Alternative plan is now active. The firing suddenly ceased. Through gaps in the smoke, Jack could see the hostiles withdrawing, moving with disciplined cover-and-move techniques toward the exits. Disengaging? That made no tactical sense, not when they still held a numerical advantage. Unless a new sound reached Jack's ears, a distinctive mechanical whirring, followed by a series of metallic clicks. His blood ran cold with recognition. Shaped charges. They were placing breaching charges on the trailer itself, abandoning the attempt to take the cargo intact in favor of simply destroying it. Jack had seconds, not minutes, to respond. He burst from cover, firing as he moved, catching one hostile in the back as the man placed a charge against the trailer's rear doors. The explosive device fell, still armed, but not yet in position to breach the reinforced compartment. The remaining hostiles redirected their attention, rounds tracking Jack as he dove behind the truck's cab for cover. Bullets pinged off metal, shattering what remained of the windows. From this position, Jack could see the shaped charge lying on the floor beside the trailer. Not yet in optimal position, but still dangerous. If it detonated, it might not breach the cargo compartment, but it would likely disable the security systems, leaving the contents vulnerable to a second attempt. Jack needed to disable the charge, but doing so would require leaving cover, exposing himself to fire from the remaining hostiles. An impossible choice. Or was it? His mind raced, evaluating options, calculating risks with the cold precision of a combat veteran. There was a third option, one that utilized the enemy's own plan against them. Jack aimed carefully at the shaped charge, controlling his breathing as he had been taught in sniper school. One round, perfectly placed, could trigger the device prematurely, before it was positioned to breach the trailer, but in a location where its detonation might catch the hostiles in its blast effect. A dangerous gamble, but Jack was out of safe options. He fired. The shaped charge detonated with a concussive roar that shook the building, sending a directed blast of superheated gas and shrapnel across the maintenance bay floor. Jack's position behind the truck's engine block protected him from the worst of the blast, but the shock wave still slammed him against unyielding metal with bone-jarring force. When his vision cleared and the ringing in his ears subsided enough to perceive his surroundings, Jack took stock. The maintenance bay was filled with smoke and dust. The trailer appeared intact, its reinforced structure having withstood the nearby detonation. And through the swirling debris, he could see the crumpled forms of hostiles caught in the blast radius. His earpiece produced only static now, the communication channel silent. Whether that meant all hostiles were down or simply that their communications had been disrupted, Jack couldn't be certain. He moved cautiously from cover, SIG raised and ready, conducting a methodical sweep of the maintenance bay. One by one, he confirmed the hostiles were neutralized, some dead, others incapacitated by injuries from the blast. The satellite phone vibrated again. Harrington. Sitrep. Jack's response was succinct. Package secure. Hostiles neutralized. Facility compromised. Understood. Assets 10 minutes out. Prepare for extraction. Jack allowed himself a moment of relief. 10 minutes. He could hold for 10 more minutes. As he conducted a final security sweep, checking for any hostiles he might have missed, Jack's mind returned to the operative's words. La Mano Negra. Not a cartel operation, but something potentially more dangerous. Something Harrington and his team would need to know about immediately. Outside, in the distance, Jack could hear helicopter rotors, the distinctive sound of military aircraft approaching rapidly. Extraction inbound. He positioned himself to secure the landing zone, establishing a perimeter around the maintenance bay entrance. The cargo would be transferred to the helicopter, the compromised truck abandoned. Standard contingency procedure. As he waited, weapon ready, senses still hyper-alert for any sign of additional threats, Jack Reeves reflected on how quickly a routine transport mission had escalated into full-scale combat. One moment he had been a truck driver on an American highway. The next, he was back in the world he had left behind. The world of violence and split-second decisions, of life balanced on the edge of a blade. That world had nearly consumed him after Maria's death. He had thrown himself into the most dangerous operations, taking risks that had earned him commendations but had worried his commanders. The long-haul trucking job had been an attempt to find peace, to escape the constant adrenaline rush of combat. Now, standing amid the aftermath of a firefight on American soil, Jack realized some men never truly left the battlefield. It followed them, found them, pulled them back into its orbit regardless of how far they ran. The helicopter sounds grew louder, rotors beating the air into submission as it approached for landing. Extraction was moments away. The mission would be completed successfully. But as Jack stood guard over the cargo he had been entrusted to protect, he knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't the end of the encounter with La Mano Negra. It was merely the opening salvo in a conflict that would follow him beyond this abandoned compound, beyond this mission, perhaps beyond any boundary he had yet encountered. The battlefield had found Jack Reeves once again, and deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, he had missed it. The Black Hawk helicopter cut through the night sky with predatory purpose, rotors slashing the darkness as it approached the abandoned compound. Jack stood in the open area before the maintenance bay, one hand raised to shield his eyes from the rotor wash that stirred dust into miniature cyclones around his boots. His other hand remained on the SIG, vigilant despite the apparent elimination of the immediate threat. The helicopter settled onto the makeshift landing zone with practiced precision, its running lights casting eerie shadows across the desert landscape. The side door slid open before the skids fully touched ground, revealing 4 figures in tactical gear. The QRF team Jack had been promised. They moved with the coordinated efficiency that marked special operations personnel, establishing a perimeter even as they assessed Jack and the situation. The team leader approached, face obscured by a ballistic mask and night vision goggles pushed up on his helmet. Reeves. The voice was familiar. Jack nodded, recognizing the speaker despite the tactical gear. Santiago. Didn't know you'd left the service. Same team, different jersey. Santiago gestured toward the maintenance bay. Package secure? Affirmative. 7 hostiles down. Possible more in the area. Jack handed Santiago the captured scar. Not Cartel. They identified as La Mano Negra. Santiago's posture changed subtly, a tensing of shoulders, a slight shift in stance that communicated immediate concern better than words could have. Confirmed? One of them talked before things went hot. Said the border would burn. Santiago nodded grimly, then signaled to his team. Two operators moved immediately to the truck, beginning the process of securing and transferring the cargo. The third maintained perimeter security, covering the approach routes to the compound with methodical sweeps of his weapon. "We've got 15 minutes, max," Santiago said, checking his watch. Local Elios picked up chatter about the firefight. "They're en route, ETA 20 minutes. We need to be gone before they arrive." Jack understood the necessity. This operation existed in the gray zone of legal authority, a place where questions about jurisdiction and oversight were deliberately left unanswered. Better for everyone if the QRF team and the sensitive cargo were long gone before county sheriff's deputies arrived to investigate reports of gunfire. "The truck's compromised," Jack said. "Coolant system shot. Engine's probably seized by now. Not your problem anymore." Santiago handed him a sat phone different from the one Jack had been using. "New comms. Your exfil is separate from the package. We're taking it straight to Fort Bliss. You're headed to a secure location for debrief. Standard procedure for compartmentalized operations. The fewer people who knew the complete picture, the better." Jack took the phone, checking its battery and signal strength automatically. "What about the hostiles? Their vehicles are still out there. Probably reinforcements inbound." Santiago's response was cool, professional. "Areas being monitored. If more show up, they'll be handled." By handled, Jack knew Santiago meant another team was already positioned to intercept any additional La Mano Negra operatives approaching the area. The chess pieces were moving, the board expanding beyond Jack's immediate view. "Your ride's 2 clicks east," Santiago continued, indicating a direction with a tilt of his head. "Coordinates are in the phone. Move fast, stay low." Questions? Jack had dozens, but none that Santiago would be authorized to answer. He shook his head. "Good hunting," Santiago said, the familiar farewell of their shared military past. "You too." As Jack moved away from the landing zone, the QRF team continued their work with practiced efficiency, transferring secure containers from the truck's hidden compartments to the helicopter. Whatever technology the prototype contained, it was important enough to warrant this level of response. Important enough for La Mano Negra to risk a direct assault on U.S. soil. The night air felt cooler now, the adrenaline of combat fading to leave Jack acutely aware of his physical condition. The graze on his arm throbbed dully, a minor injury, but one that required attention. His muscles ached from the exertion of combat and the impact of the shaped charge detonation. But these were familiar discomforts, almost welcome in their reminder that he was alive. Jack oriented himself using the stars, an old habit from field training that had saved his life more than once when technology failed. East, 2 kilometers. He set out at a steady jog, conserving energy while covering ground efficiently. The desert landscape was both obstacle and ally, difficult terrain that slowed his progress but also provided concealment from potential hostiles. Jack moved from shadow to shadow, using the natural contours of the land to minimize his silhouette against the horizon. Behind him, the distinctive sound of the Black Hawk's rotors increased in volume as the helicopter lifted off, its mission complete. The cargo was secure, headed for the protected confines of Fort Bliss. Jack's part in that particular operation was over. But something larger had begun. La Mano Negra. The Black Hand. An entity Santiago had recognized immediately, had reacted to with heightened concern. Not just another border threat, but something that warranted special attention. Jack's thoughts were interrupted by the distinctive crack of a rifle shot, followed immediately by the impact of a round into the ground 3 feet to his left. Sniper. At least 200 yards, based on the delay between shot and impact. He dove for cover behind a rocky outcropping, pressing his body into the earth as a second shot struck the rocks above him, sending fragments flying. The shooter was good, adjusting quickly for windage and elevation, despite the difficult night conditions. Jack's mind calculated angles and probabilities. The shot had come from the northeast, an elevated position, probably one of the rocky ridges that punctuated the landscape. The sniper would have a thermal scope, allowing them to track Jack's heat signature across the cooling desert terrain. He needed to move to find better cover, but doing so would expose him momentarily to the sniper's field of fire. Problematic. The sat phone Santiago had given him vibrated. Jack extracted it carefully, keeping his body shielded by the rocks. A text message displayed on the screen. Sniper identified. Hold position. Someone was watching. Monitoring. The chess game continuing. Seconds later, Jack heard another shot, different caliber, different direction. A pause, then the distinctive sound of a round impacting human flesh and bone. The counter-sniper had done their job. The sat phone vibrated again. Clear TO move. Additional hostiles approaching from south. Expedite to exfil. Jack resumed his movement east, increasing his pace. The terrain began to change, becoming more rugged, dotted with larger rock formations and deeper arroyos cut by seasonal water flow. Good defensive territory, but also more challenging to navigate, especially in the limited visibility of night. The sound reached him before he saw the source: engines, multiple vehicles approaching rapidly from the south. Headlights appeared, cutting across the desert in search patterns. La Mano Negra reinforcements, hunting for their missing assault team. Jack dropped into a dry wash, using its depth for concealment as he continued moving east. The vehicles were coming closer, their search pattern becoming more focused. They must have communications with another element, perhaps aerial surveillance. The thought had barely formed when Jack heard it, the distinctive buzz of a drone, small but unmistakable in the quiet desert night. Thermal imaging would make the wash inadequate as concealment. Jack needed an alternative strategy immediately. His training provided the answer. If you can't hide from thermal, change your thermal signature. He removed his jacket quickly, stuffed it with desert vegetation, and placed it in the wash, creating a heat signature that would continue moving east. Then he backtracked, finding a narrow side channel that led north before reconnecting with the main wash further east. The drone's buzz grew louder, passing directly overhead as Jack pressed himself into the narrow confines of the side channel. He held his breath, counting seconds, waiting for the unmanned aircraft to follow the decoy he'd created. The sound diminished as the drone continued east, tracking the jacket's residual heat signature. Jack allowed himself a tight smile. Technology was formidable, but understanding its limitations was often the key to defeating it. He resumed his movement, following the side channel until it rejoined the main wash. The coordinates Santiago had provided were less than a kilometer away now. Jack increased his pace, pushing through the fatigue that tugged at his muscles. The exfiltration point appeared ahead, a small clearing beside another abandoned structure, this one little more than a roofless stone shell. The remnant of some long-forgotten desert homestead, its purpose now reduced to a navigational reference point on a tactical map. Jack approached cautiously, weapon ready, senses alert for any sign of ambush. The area appeared clear, but appearances were often deceiving in his line of work. The sat phone vibrated again. Stand by for extraction. Signal when ready. Jack did another visual sweep of the area, confirming it was secure, then sent a simple response, ready. Seconds later, he heard it, the distinctive sound of an approaching helicopter, different from the Black Hawk that had extracted the cargo. Smaller, faster, its sound signature suggesting a little bird, the agile aircraft favored for special operations insertions and extractions. The helicopter appeared suddenly, seeming to materialize from the darkness as it descended toward the clearing. No running lights, its black fuselage visible only as a deeper shadow against the night sky. The pilot's skill was evident in the precision of the approach, settling into a hover just above the desert floor. A single figure rappelled from the helicopter, touching down with practiced ease before scanning the area with a weapon at the ready. Even in the darkness, Jack recognized the distinctive movement patterns of Delta Force. The operator approached Jack, conducted a quick visual confirmation, then gestured toward the hovering helicopter. No words were exchanged. None were necessary. The mission parameters were clear. Jack moved to the aircraft, gripped the rappel line that had been transformed into a fast rope for extraction, and ascended with the efficient upper body strength of someone who had performed the maneuver countless times in training and combat. Inside the helicopter, he was met by another operator who secured him with a safety harness as the aircraft immediately began gaining altitude, banking sharply to the east as it accelerated away from the extraction point. Through the open door, Jack could see the vehicles of the La Mano Negra search party, their headlights converging on the area where his decoy jacket had led the drone. By the time they realized they'd been tracking an empty piece of clothing, he would be miles away. The Little Bird's pilot pushed the aircraft to its operational limits, skimming low over the desert terrain to minimize radar signature while maximizing speed. The two Delta operators in the passenger compartment maintained their vigilance, scanning for threats through night vision devices, weapons ready. Jack checked his watch. Less than 40 minutes had passed since the firefight at the compound. 40 minutes that had transformed a routine transport operation into something that now involved multiple special operations teams, counter-surveillance measures, and an extraction worthy of a high-value target in hostile territory. All on American soil. All because of La Mano Negra. The helicopter banked again, changing course toward the north. Through the headset he'd been handed, Jack heard the pilot's voice for the first time, calm and precise amid the roar of the engines. 20 minutes to secure facility. Stand by for approach briefing. The operator across from Jack handed him a tablet displaying a satellite image of their destination. A nondescript compound surrounded by security fencing, its buildings arranged in a pattern that suggested military precision rather than civilian usage. A black site, one of many such facilities scattered across the southwestern United States, their existence acknowledged only through vague budget line items and redacted documents. The operator pointed to a specific building on the image, indicating their destination. Jack nodded understanding. The debriefing would be thorough, detailed, and completely deniable if ever questioned in official channels. As the helicopter continued its flight through the darkness, Jack found his thoughts returning to the operative's words at the compound. The border will burn. Not a threat, but a statement of intent. A promise from an organization willing to conduct direct action operations against U.S. interests. La Mano Negra had demonstrated capabilities beyond those of traditional cartel enforcers. Their operators had been trained, disciplined, equipped with hardware typically reserved for military or high-end security forces. Their tactics had shown coordination and planning that spoke of professional military experience. A new player on the borderland's chessboard, and one apparently willing to escalate beyond the unspoken rules that had governed cartel operations for decades. The helicopter began its descent toward the secure facility, the pilot executing a series of evasive maneuvers, standard procedure to defeat any potential tracking or targeting systems. The compound appeared below, illuminated only by perimeter security lighting that cast long shadows across the desert terrain. Jack could see figures moving on the ground, security personnel establishing a perimeter around the landing zone, their weapons and posture indicating professional military backgrounds. This wasn't a standard government facility. This was something else entirely. The Little Bird settled onto the designated landing pad with practiced precision. The moment the skids touched concrete, the security team moved forward, creating a protected corridor from the aircraft to the nearest building. Jack followed the Delta operators through this human gauntlet, noting the specialized weapons and equipment of the security personnel. Not military, not law enforcement. Something in between. Inside the building, the atmosphere changed from tactical urgency to the controlled efficiency of an intelligence operation. Jack was led through sterile corridors to a room containing a single desk, 3 chairs, and no windows. A debriefing room designed for one purpose, the extraction of information. The door closed behind him, leaving Jack momentarily alone. He used the time to center himself, to organize his thoughts and observations into the structured format of a mission debrief. The details would matter, Every word spoken by the La Mano Negra operative, every piece of equipment they had carried, every tactic they had employed. The door opened, admitting two individuals who represented the dual nature of the operation Jack had been involved in. One wore the uniform of a U.S. Army colonel, his chest adorned with the ribbons and badges that spoke of extensive combat experience. The other wore a nondescript suit that practically screamed Federal Intelligence Service. "Mr. Reeves," the colonel began, "I'm Colonel Harrington. We spoke via text during your operation." He gestured to the man in the suit. "This is Mr. Walsh. He has some questions about what you encountered today." Jack nodded, unsurprised by the introduction. Operations like this always involved multiple agencies, multiple chains of command, each with their own priorities and concerns. "La Mano Negra," Walsh said without preamble, pronouncing the name with the careful precision of someone who had studied Spanish rather than grown up speaking it. "Tell us exactly what the operative said about them." Jack recounted the conversation verbatim, his memory enhanced by the clarity that often accompanied combat situations. "He said I was blind if I thought it was about drugs or territory. He said there are forces at work beyond my understanding, forces that will reshape the borderlands in fire and blood." His exact words were "La Mano Negra rises. The border will burn." Walsh exchanged a glance with Harrington, a silent communication that confirmed Jack's suspicion. They had been tracking La Mano Negra before this incident. "The operatives," Harrington said, returning his attention to Jack. "Your assessment of their capabilities. Professional, military-trained, or at least some of them. Their equipment was high-end, SCAR rifles, thermal imaging, shaped charges. Their tactics showed discipline and coordination. Not cartel street soldiers. More like a specialized strike team." Walsh nodded, making notes on a tablet. "And their target, the cargo you were transporting. Did they indicate why it was important to them?" "Negative, but they were willing to destroy it rather than let it be recovered. That suggests they understood its significance." Harrington leaned forward. "In your professional assessment, Mr. Reeves, what are we dealing with here?" Jack considered the question carefully. Based on the operatives' statements and their willingness to conduct a direct action operation on U.S. soil, I'd categorize La Mano Negra as an ideologically motivated paramilitary organization with territorial ambitions. More insurgency than cartel, though they may use cartel infrastructure and methodologies. Walsh seemed satisfied with the assessment. "That aligns with our intelligence." He stood, gathering his tablet. "Colonel Harrington will handle the remainder of your debriefing. You'll be returned to civilian status once we've confirmed there's no further threat to you personally." With that, he exited the room, leaving Jack alone with Harrington. The colonel waited until the door closed before speaking again. "You did good work today, Reeves. Saved a lot of lives by keeping that technology out of their hands." "What exactly was I carrying, Colonel?" Harrington shook his head. "Compartmentalized information. You know how it works." Jack did know. In operations like this, information was provided on a need-to-know basis, and he apparently didn't need to know what had been worth risking his life to protect. "La Mano Negra," Jack said instead. "They're planning something significant." "Yes." Harrington's response was simple but heavy with implication. "Something we need to be prepared for." "We." The colonel studied Jack for a moment, as if making a final assessment. "Your background makes you uniquely qualified for the kind of operation we're building. Former Ranger. Multiple combat deployments. Experience with the border region and its particular challenges. And now, direct contact with La Mano Negra." Jack recognized the approach, the careful positioning of a recruitment pitch disguised as a debriefing. "I'm retired, Colonel. I drive a truck now. And today you engaged and defeated a trained strike team while protecting sensitive national security technology." Harrington leaned forward. "You can go back to driving trucks, Reeves. No one would blame you. But we both know the real reason you took this transport job was because you missed the sense of purpose that came with serving." The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Jack had left the military seeking peace, seeking distance from the violent life he had lived for so many years. But civilian existence had proven hollow, empty of the camaraderie and purpose that had defined his military career. "What exactly are you proposing?" Jack asked, caution in his voice. "A specialized task force," Harrington replied, "focused on border security threats like La Mano Negra. Small, agile, operating with appropriate authorities both sides of the line when necessary. Deniable operations when required." The colonel didn't bother with euphemisms. "This isn't conventional warfare, Reeves. These threats exist in the gray zones between military action and law enforcement. Our response needs to be equally adaptable." Jack considered the offer. The practical side of his mind noted the obvious advantages: better pay than commercial trucking, a return to the kind of work he excelled at, the camaraderie of serving with like-minded professionals, the sense of purpose that had been missing since he'd left the Rangers. But there were costs as well. The violence, the danger, the compartmentalized existence that had contributed to the failure of his marriage before Maria's death. The nightmares that still sometimes woke him in the dark hours of the night, sweat-soaked and reaching for a weapon. "I need time to think about it," Jack said finally. Harrington nodded, unsurprised. "Take 48 hours. The number in your new sat phone will connect you directly to me." He stood, signaling the end of the debriefing. "Whatever you decide, Reeves, what you did today mattered. Remember that." Jack was escorted from the debriefing room to temporary quarters within the secure facility. The space was Spartan but comfortable: a bed, a bathroom, basic amenities. A gilded cage, essentially, until they confirmed he wasn't being targeted personally by La Mano Negra. Alone, Jack found himself confronting questions that transcended the immediate tactical situation. Who was he now? The Army Ranger whose instincts had saved his life multiple times during the firefight? The truck driver seeking a quieter existence? Or something in between? A warrior trying to find peace in a world that seemed determined to deny it to him? The events of the day had revealed a truth Jack had been avoiding since leaving military service. He hadn't really left the battlefield. He had simply been waiting for it to find him again. And now it had, in the form of La Mano Negra, an enemy organized enough to target strategic technologies, disciplined enough to execute complex operations, and ideologically driven toward objectives that extended beyond profit or territory. "The border will burn." The operative's words echoed in Jack's mind as he lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Not a threat, but a promise. A declaration of intent from an organization willing to act on American soil. Jack Reeves had spent his military career standing against such threats, placing himself between danger and the innocent lives that danger threatened. He had defined himself by that purpose, had found meaning in that service. Could he walk away now, knowing what was coming? Could he return to the solitary existence of long-haul trucking, watching the news reports of border violence and knowing he had chosen not to act? The questions followed Jack into uneasy sleep, his mind replaying the day's events in fragmented dreams. The firefight at the compound. The operative's fanatical certainty. Santiago's grim recognition of La Mano Negra's significance. Harrington's offer. When Jack woke hours later, the questions remained. But now, they were accompanied by something else, a growing certainty about the answer. About who Jack Reeves truly was, and the path he would choose in the face of this new threat. The border would not burn. Not if he had anything to say about it. 48 hours after the firefight, Jack Reeves stood on the observation deck of the secure facility, watching the sun rise over the desert landscape. The vast emptiness stretched to the horizon, painted in shades of gold and amber by the early morning light. In that emptiness, Jack found a strange clarity, a perspective that had eluded him during the frantic events of the past 2 days. A light wind carried the scent of sage and dust, familiar elements of a borderland that Jack had come to know intimately during his time as a trucker. That life seemed distant now, as if belonging to someone else. In many ways, it had been someone else, a version of Jack Reeves trying to outrun his true nature. The door to the observation deck opened behind him. Jack didn't need to turn to know who had joined him. "Made your decision?" Colonel Harrington asked, coming to stand beside Jack at the railing. "Yes." The colonel waited, knowing better than to push. Men like Jack Reeves didn't respond well to pressure. "What happens to my truck?" Jack asked. Harrington smiled slightly. Not the question he had expected. Salvage teams recovered it yesterday. The trailer's contents were already secure at Fort Bliss. The truck itself is being transported to a facility where it will be stripped of all specialized equipment and sold at government auction. Someone's going to get a hell of a deal on a Peterbilt. The proceeds will be deposited in your account. Compensation for loss of livelihood. Jack nodded. Fair enough. The truck had represented more than just employment. It had been home, sanctuary, a mobile fortress against the complexities of civilian life. Now it was gone, another casualty of his encounter with La Mano Negra. The wounded operative, Jack said. The one who mentioned La Mano Negra. Did he survive? He did, Harrington confirmed. Currently in custody at a specialized interrogation facility. The information he's providing has been illuminating. Illuminating how? The colonel hesitated, measuring how much to share. La Mano Negra isn't new. They've been operating in the shadows for at least 3 years, gradually building capability and influence. What's new is their ambition. They're no longer content with regional power. They're positioning for something larger. The border will burn, Jack quoted. Exactly. Intelligence suggests they're planning a coordinated series of attacks designed to destabilize the entire border region. Create chaos, undermine authority, establish themselves as the dominant power in the vacuum that follows. Using what we were transporting? Harrington's expression confirmed Jack's suspicion. The prototype communication systems would have given them capabilities beyond anything normally available to non-state actors. Fortunately, you prevented that outcome. Jack turned from the view, facing the colonel directly. I'm in, but I have conditions. Name them. Operational autonomy. I select my own team, with your approval. No political interference with tactical decisions in the field. Harrington's expression revealed nothing. What else? Full disclosure about La Mano Negra. Everything you know, everything you learn. I don't work blind. Done. Anything else? Jack thought of Maria, of the gold band he still wore, of the promise he'd made at her grave. Whatever we do, it protects people on both sides of the border. This isn't about politics. It's about stopping those who would use violence against innocents for their own purposes. The colonel nodded slowly. That's the mission, Reeves. Stop La Mano Negra before they can implement their plans. Protect the borderlands and the people who live there. He extended his hand. Welcome to Task Force, Sentinel. Jack took the offered hand, the decision solidifying with the handshake. He was back in the fight. Not as an army ranger, not as a truck driver, but as something new, a warrior with purpose, standing against a threat few civilians would ever know existed. Within hours, Jack was briefed on the operational structure of Task Force Sentinel, a joint agency initiative combining elements of military special operations, federal law enforcement, and intelligence services. Small, agile, and operating with authorities that blurred traditional jurisdictional boundaries. The briefing room contained maps of the border region, satellite imagery of suspected La Mano Negra facilities, and intelligence reports detailing the organization's known operatives and activities. Jack absorbed the information with the focused attention of a professional, asking clarifying questions, identifying gaps in intelligence, suggesting potential approaches. We've identified 3 key lieutenants, the intelligence officer explained, displaying photographs on the main screen. Alejandro Vega, former Mexican Special Forces. Eduardo Morales, ex-Zetas cartel enforcer. And this woman, known only as La Profesora, believed to be their strategic planner and ideological leader. Jack studied the images. Vega and Morales matched the profile he would expect, hard-faced men with the dead eyes of experienced killers. But La Profesora was different. Middle-aged, academic in appearance, with intelligent eyes that seemed to evaluate the camera capturing her image. What's her background? Jack asked. Unknown. She appeared on our radar approximately 2 years ago, always in the company of high-level cartel figures or suspected La Mano Negra operatives. No record of her existence before that. It's possible she's operating under a completely fabricated identity. She's the key, Jack said with certainty. The men are weapons. She's the one aiming them. The intelligence officer nodded agreement. That's our assessment as well. Unfortunately, she's the most elusive of the three. We've had multiple opportunities to target Vega and Morales, but operational restrictions prevented direct action. Political considerations. Jack understood the constraints, even if he didn't agree with them. Operations against foreign nationals on foreign soil required delicate handling, especially when those operations existed in the gray areas beyond conventional military or law enforcement parameters. Those restrictions are no longer in place, Harrington said, entering the briefing room. The incident at the compound changed the calculus. La Mano Negra has demonstrated both intent and capability to conduct operations on U.S. soil. That crosses a line. The implications were clear. Task Force Sentinel would have the operational latitude to take direct action against La Mano Negra leadership, regardless of which side of the border they occupied. Your team, Harrington continued, handing Jack a tablet displaying personnel files. All volunteers, all with relevant experience. You'll recognize some of them. Jack scrolled through the files, noting familiar names and faces. Santiago, the QRF team leader from the compound extraction. Rivera, a former DEA undercover operative with extensive cartel infiltration experience. Jensen, a Delta operator Jack had worked with in Afghanistan. Others with specialized skills ranging from technical surveillance to cultural intelligence. A good team. Experienced, capable, diverse in their expertise. The kind of unit that could operate effectively in the complex environment of the borderlands. When do we start? Jack asked. You already have, Harrington replied. The moment you engaged La Mano Negra at the compound, you became their priority target. Our intelligence indicates they've already dispatched a team to locate and eliminate you. The news didn't surprise Jack. He had killed several of their operators, disrupted their attempt to acquire valuable technology. Retaliation was inevitable. Let them come, he said simply. Harrington's expression hardened. This isn't about bravado, Reeves. We're using their focus on you as an operational advantage. You're the bait in a trap designed to capture their assassination team and extract intelligence on La Mano Negra's command structure. Now Jack understood. He wasn't just joining Task Force Sentinel. He was its initial operational focus, the vulnerability that would draw La Mano Negra into the open. When and where? Tomorrow. Location that provides controlled access and minimized collateral risk. We're setting up a cover story now. You'll be debriefed at Border Patrol headquarters in El Paso, providing a statement about a hijacking attempt on your truck. Standard procedure following the kind of incident reported near the compound. A solid plan. Use official channels to create a legitimate reason for Jack's presence, one that La Mano Negra's intelligence sources would confirm. Establish a predictable pattern, a vulnerability they could target. And when they did, the task force would be waiting. The team will be in position before you arrive, Harrington continued. Technical surveillance, counter-sniper elements, quick reaction force. Multiple layers of security, none visible to casual observation. Jack nodded approval. The operation leveraged his military experience while accounting for the unique challenge of conducting counterterrorism operations on domestic soil. It wasn't Afghanistan or Iraq, where the rules of engagement were more permissive. This required precision, discipline, and absolute control. One more thing, Harrington added. Your new identity package. He handed Jack a sealed envelope. Driver's license, credit cards, background documentation. Same name, but a more robust cover than your previous trucking credentials. It will withstand deeper scrutiny. Jack opened the envelope, examining the contents. The documentation was flawless, indistinguishable from legitimate identification. His photograph, his name, but with subtle adjustments to his background information. Enhanced protection for his new role. Get some rest, Harrington advised. Tomorrow will be a long day. Alone in his quarters that night, Jack found himself reflecting on the strange, circular journey that had brought him back to the world of counterterrorism. He had left the Rangers seeking peace, only to find himself drawn inexorably back to conflict. Not by choice, not by chance, but by the undeniable pull of purpose. He removed the gold band from his finger, studying it in the dim light. Maria would have understood. She had been a warrior too, had known the weight of responsibility that came with the skills they possessed, the duty to act when others could not. "I'm back in, babe," he whispered to the silent room. Different battlefield, same fight. The ring went back on his finger, a talisman connecting past to present, reminder of what had been lost and what remained to be protected. Jack Reeves slept soundly that night, without the restless dreams that had plagued him in the years since leaving military service. In their place was a calm certainty, a clarity of purpose that had been missing from his life on the highways. Tomorrow would bring danger, would put him squarely in the sights of a determined enemy. But it would also place him exactly where he belonged, standing between that enemy and the innocent lives they threatened. A sentinel on the borderlands, guardian against the darkness that sought to consume them. The transformation was complete. Jack Reeves, truck driver, had answered the call that had always been waiting for him, had embraced his true nature as a warrior with purpose, as a protector of those who could not protect themselves. La Mano Negra had intended to burn the border, to create chaos from which they could forge their own twisted vision of power. Instead, they had awakened something they could not have anticipated, a task force built around a man who had spent his life preparing for exactly this kind of fight. As dawn broke over the facility, Jack rose and prepared himself with the methodical precision of a soldier. The moment of decision had passed. Now came the moment of action. The hunter was ready to become the hunted, to spring the trap that would begin dismantling La Mano Negra's operations. The border would not burn, not while Jack Reeves stood watch. The Border Patrol headquarters in El Paso buzzed with activity, a choreographed illusion of normalcy that masked the tensed readiness of Task Force Sentinel operatives positioned throughout the complex. Jack sat in an interview room, providing his statement to an agent who was part of the operation, the mundane process serving as perfect cover for the trap being set. Through his earpiece, disguised as a hearing aid, Jack received periodic updates from Santiago, who was coordinating the surveillance net from a command post 3 blocks away. Target vehicle approaching from the south. Black SUV, 3 occupants. Matches intelligence profile for La Mano Negra assassination team. Jack continued his statement without pause, his expression revealing nothing of the deadly game unfolding around him. The agent across the table, also receiving the updates, maintained the facade with equal professionalism. They're stopping at the security checkpoint. Stand by. They're presenting credentials. Border Patrol IDs. Good forgeries, but we flagged them. The trap was springing exactly as planned. La Mano Negra had infiltrated their operatives using false credentials, gaining access to the secured facility where they believed Jack would be vulnerable. Team 1 has visual on all 3 subjects. Moving into position. Outside the interview room, Jack knew the task force was silently closing the net, isolating the assassination team from potential escape routes while maintaining the illusion of normal operations. Execute. The single command triggered precisely coordinated action throughout the complex. Jack's interview room door opened to reveal Jensen, the Delta operator, who nodded once. Time to move. Jack followed him through back corridors to a secure observation room, where monitors displayed the operation in progress. On the screens, Task Force Sentinel operatives had successfully contained and neutralized the assassination team without a single shot fired. The precision of the interdiction spoke to the elite capabilities Harrington had assembled. Initial electronics sweep confirms their La Mano Negra, Santiago reported, entering the observation room. Their comms equipment matches what we recovered at the compound. We also found this. He handed Jack a small device. Tracking beacon. They placed it on your truck during the initial surveillance. That's how they found you at the compound. Jack examined the device, nodding with professional appreciation. Sophisticated. Military grade. Exactly, Santiago confirmed. This isn't cartel equipment. This is state-sponsored technology. The implications were significant. La Mano Negra wasn't just another border threat. They were receiving support from sources with access to advanced military hardware and training. The interrogation is already yielding results, Harrington said, joining them in the observation room. One of them broke quickly. Gave up a location for a planning cell operating out of Juarez. We're coordinating with Mexican authorities for a joint operation. Jack recognized the momentum building. The successful interdiction had created an intelligence windfall that would lead to further operations, further disruption of La Mano Negra's capabilities and plans. The cartel's defeat was undeniable. Though some questioned the extent of Jack's actions, most celebrated the powerful message sent. America does not bow to intimidation. Jack, humble yet firm, quietly stepped back from the limelight, continuing duties without fanfare, steadfast in moral clarity. Their story stands as a testament to an enduring American truth, that genuine strength lies not in aggression but in preparedness, resolve, and the unwavering commitment to justice and liberty for all. What do you think about this incredible stand? Do you believe strength alone guarantees justice, or does real power lie in partnership, strategy, and bravery? Share your perspective in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories of courage in the face of overwhelming odds.